Just because there's two bottles, I don't make it feel like we're trying to keep this sober. This is the show opened on February 21st. It runs through March 14th. Everybody, I'm sure, knows Bobbie Moline-Kramer, obvious master talent, and conceptually breaking through the barrier between realism and abstraction. And I personally love the idea that there's this evolutionary thing going on with it too. So without further ado, she's joined by Peter Frank, who, if I started reciting Peter's resume now, we'll be here shorter period of time with them two talking than with me reciting Peter's resume. Suffice to say, he's a leading art critic in the Los Angeles art scene, going on his ninth decade.
Yeah. It only feels that way.
It only feels that way. Okay. So let's enjoy a conversation between Peter Frank and Bobbie Moline-Kramer.
Thank you. Thank you, and welcome. I'm glad you got here at 3 and not 4. And happy International Women's Day, and a shout out to all you international women. Bobbie Moline-Kramer is an international woman, at least in purview, and the work you see in front of you. I'm guessing that the majority of people in this room have seen Bobbie's work before. You may not have seen this series of work. She's been developing it for the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
And is this the first public airing of it?
Yes.
Okay, it's going to be traveling to other venues in the United States, and who knows, abroad, given that it's International Women's Day. But it does mark a notable evolutionary step in Bobbie's work. And it's nice to talk about evolutionary steps, given the fact that her current subject are lower primates and other mammals. The thing is that you don't see those subjects until you look into the work. This is not simply game playing. This is not, say, it's not a kind of a simian version of Where's Waldo. It's a matter of the relationship of image to gesture, of subject matter to material, to the material of painting, of art making. I'm going to quote briefly from the essay that Dominique Nahas wrote about this series of work. I'd quote myself, but it was Bobbie's previous series of work that I wrote about, a series called All That Remains. We'll talk in a minute about Bobbie's evolution to this point, but let me quote Dominique Nahas on this body of work, As Above, So Below. This work no longer prioritizes the immediately intelligible or even the recognizable image's contours over other variables or other marks in the visual field. Instead, this work has a psychological dimension and pull to it that distinguishes it from the artist's preceding works, as I said. Bobbie Moline-Kramer's use of gestural marks of all kinds, Dominique claims, is unprecedented. It's certainly unprecedented in her work, and it's not the kind of thing you often see, although there are certain art historical precedents, especially associated with surrealism, but we'll get to that in a moment. I wanted to talk with Bobbie and find out her consideration of her own evolution to this point. Which body of work that you did, how far back was getting to this point?
I would say at least 6 years ago. All that remains was the show that you wrote about, was the one that was the door to it, to this show.
Right.
And
Interesting description.
yeah, by opening that, by refusing to stay inside the box
Right.
of what really, that's what hyperrealism is.
It's a box.
It's a box.
And what were you doing as a hyperrealist? What were you doing inside that box?
Well, even then I couldn't stand just doing a visual without making things up. So I was doing highly reflective surfaces. And so you would look into it, and it was another world. It was a form of surrealism. Mm-hmm. And it reached the zenith. It got totally crazy when I reflected myself in 100 and some little flutes on a silver pitcher. And I thought, if I don't quit soon.
And you were rendering these.
Highly rendering.
Exactly.
They were beyond photos.
This was the middle of the last decade, right?
Yes.
About 10 years ago. Okay. You were...
Well, that's impossible. I was just born in the last...
Come on.
Yeah.
You're at least 5 years older than that.
Yeah.
But it was an entirely pictorial approach up to that point.
Absolutely.
You were rendering. You were depicting what you wanted us to see.
It was illustrative.
Yes.
And it was
in
also...
Impulse. In impulse.
Yes, yeah. Yes. And it also was highly structured, very anal. And yeah, I exactly what I wanted someone to see. That's what I was painting.
Right. And it sounds like you just lost patience with it.
Either that or I lost my mind.
Same thing.
Same thing. There came a day, and I just had a very large brush. Up until that time, I had been working with double and triple aught brushes. That's all I owned. And I actually got a 2-inch brush, which seemed huge to me at the time. And I just let loose. That was it. And I did not go back.
Although in one sense, you really never left, because you took the aspects of hyperrealism that you valued and value to this day with you, and simply said, I'm keeping these are going to integrate into my new approach. And how hard was it to achieve this integration? And also, were you feeling as if the new gestural approach was being imposed upon the image, or was it bringing forth the image in a new way? What was your... I'm asking from the point of view as the viewer. I'm looking at the finished artwork. Mm-hmm. The finished, and how much of the process of the art making did you want, and do you want, to communicate to us?
Well, I think that's the whole thing. The process to me is what these are about. Mm-hmm. The backgrounds were done sometimes 2 years before the image. Mm-hmm. And I have drawers full of them. So I just dance and paint. And when it pleases me, when the background pleases me, I stop. There are life drawings underneath many of these. I would take
underneath?
Them, yeah,
Actually
underneath, yeah. I would take them to class and do life drawings. People would like them, and I'd go, too bad. And they would get covered up with more gesso.
Mm-hmm. Then, okay, because sometimes some of these, it does seem as if the realistic indicators are emerging from behind a storm of painterly gesture. In other places, it feels as if these lurking eyes or or tentative hands are in fact generating these whirlwinds. There's this. I think this is the real strength of this body of work, the ultimate equality of emphasis, subtle as it is, and difficult to grasp as it is at first. That finally, once you find the hand, the eyes, the indicator of some sort of life a pictorial indicator of life in this work, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
It can optically disappear back into the maelstrom, but it can never again leave.
The process behind them, there's actually much less realistic painting on them than most people suspect, mainly because the process is so convoluted as far as layer upon layer upon layer. Many of them have 6, 7, 8 layers. And I hang them up for days at a time trying to see something inside them. Mm-hmm. And when I finally see it, it's much like you described. Then you can't unsee it. And if I were to tell you which parts are actually painted and which parts were part of the background, you might be surprised because there's actually much less realistic painting on these than most people suspect.
Oh, they think it's an actual image, actual image painted over.
Yes, and they also think that I paint parts in so that it all matches, which I don't. You know, I find pretty much how it's sitting inside the painting, and then I paint the parts that I think humans associate with more closely, the face and the hands.
Right. But those don't always come second, as I said before. Sometimes they're the generative presence that sets the storm in motion, and sometimes they're the affected presence that gets swallowed by the storm.
Well, I like that. I mean, if that's how it works, I'm pleased. You know, then it's worked. It's done it.
The best ones, it happens both at once.
Oh.
that the creature seems overwhelmed by the storm that he or she or it has generated in the first place. I don't want to cast a moral structure on this. You know that.
Go ahead.
We're responsible for our own cyclones, but and that would be especially unfair in the ones where the eyes or the evident images are of animals as opposed to humans, since animals are not involved in free will.
These are as close as you're going to get to free will. These monkeys, these Japanese monkeys, totally roam free. Mm-hmm. There are no cages, there are no zoos. And humans end up being in their land, mm-hmm. Absolutely in their land. And I purposely chose these because they are closer to us in the animal kingdom.
And okay, so they point to an evolution, not just of DNA, but of consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tried to, because when I observed them, I was in Japan almost a month, and when I was observing them, what I found, maybe it was an overlay of what I was feeling, mm-hmm. But they seemed to have a separate set of feelings. They seemed to respond in a certain way, which fascinated me. So that's one of the things I tried for.
When did you go to Japan and observe these?
2013.
2013. So, which is really the transition point between All That Remains and this series.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What were you doing in All That Remains that transited to here? Just to give the audience an idea of what the practice was in All That Remains, what All That Remains.
I was having family issues, so I took each member of my family and turned them into a bird. Seemed to work. And then I took these birds and I put them in situations, and one per each or two per each panel. And when you put all the panels together, they actually formed a full tree, which I called my life history. And so I made a history. And they were crows, which is appropriate. And just breaking out of the idea that a painting has to be self-contained on one canvas and that it can't move beyond that was fascinating. And then being able to just mess with the surface. They were graphite, they were glitter, they were gesso, they were burned into the surface. It was really fun. I hadn't had fun for a long time, yeah.
So when you say that the idea of a painting had to be entirely self-contained, what you describe as a painting is at once a picture and an application, the process of the application of paint.
Right, yeah.
Which points at this work, which still maintains the discussion between painting and picture making.
It does to a lesser degree. Yes, it does.
Than the previous series.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Much lesser degree. This is much more abstract than the other. I would have done it entirely differently today than I did it then. I would have left out a lot of stuff.
Well, that's what you're doing here.
That's exactly what I'm doing here. Yeah.
Except that we have to keep in mind that as we find these references to the real in these gestural abstractions, those references to the real seem to emerge all at once and lock into place, such as the monkey eyes in the center painting there. Mm-hmm. That where they fall, where we find them, implies an entire picture that has been practically blown away by the painting, by the act of painting. So there's this active relationship between painting as an activity and picture making as a goal.
And I think that's probably where I've been headed for my whole career. And I'm actually thrilled that I got there, or at least the beginning stages of getting there. The fact that you believe that you can see parts of the monkey in parts that were never meant to be, the fact that it seems that part of it is erased, yeah, I'm all for it. I mean, it didn't start that way. Mm-hmm. It's just...
This brings up that whole issue of abstraction as opposed to realism that the Europeans have been jumping up and down about since for over 100 years.
Yeah.
What's the abstract part are the references to humans and monkeys, because that's abstract because that's not really what we're seeing is not really there. The concrete part, the real part, are the gestures that have no presence before us except as gestures. advocates of pure non-objective abstraction say that their work is the real work,
Yes.
is real. And that if somebody paints a picture of something, that something isn't there, a picture of it is there, and the picture has been in fact invented. So,
Well, this has been going on for a long time. I mean, it's not a pipe, right? But it's also, I don't think that I actually believe in abstraction. And I think that's part of what's happening also. I think that, and I know that what you see is entirely differently from what I see.
and what I see is entirely different from anyone in this room.
Right. Yeah, you bring your own set of stuff into it.
Right.
And that colors everything that you see. So who's to say that they don't really, in a snowstorm, look like that? I mean,
Exactly. Or a paint storm, actually.
yeah, great. And by the way, I have a splatter room in my house.
A
A splatter room.
Separate from the studio?
Yes. Sounds ominous, doesn't it?
Ominous in a good way. So far. Well, that brings me to that painting. That's the square painting right over there,
Yes.
where the quote realistic aspects are articulations of the drips of the splatter.
Yes.
I mean, that is a quintessential statement about abstraction, quote unquote, and realism, quote unquote. Because what's real is the abstract, is abstract, and thus what's abstract must be real as well. Everybody makes a big deal over those brush strokes that Roy Lichtenstein rendered
Right.
in his cartoon style, but and they posited a positive negative concept. You know, the brush strokes are abstract, but this is a depiction of the brush strokes, which a depiction that is quote real. Here, the process of abstraction and the process of depiction happen in exactly the same space, and there is an almost complete erasure of boundary between what's real and what's abstract.
Messing with you.
Well, look closely at that one. That is either the first painting you should look at in this show or the last. What would you say?
I think the last, because I think it's going there,
In other words, this is an indication of where you're headed.
where I'm headed. Mm-hmm.
Aha! I was hoping you'd say that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I think I will always have bits and pieces of hyper-realism. It's just that they're going to come about not because I place them inside, but rather because something inside the abstraction already is indicative of it. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure that's where it's going.
Were you trained as a painter, as an illustrator, or what?
Oh, it's even worse. I did biomedical illustration. I did pre-med.
That's not worse. That's the best excuse possible.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right then.
Absolutely, because that's not mere illustration.
No, it isn't.
And even in terms of tradition, you know, anatomical rendering is at the top of the food chain in terms of depiction.
Well, I taught it. I taught at Cal State Long Beach, and really, if you can't draw the human body, if you don't know how it hangs together, and you're not able to do that, everything else you draw doesn't work so well. It just doesn't work. It was being able to get out of the academic portion of it.
Right. Excuse me for a second.
Yeah.
Just realized I hadn't turned off my phone, and if I get a call,
Loss of service.
if I get a call, there's hell to pay.
That's got it.
The rest of you can ignore your phones. I have to silence mine. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, it took a long, long time. I mean, I'd like to be able to say I was just phenomenally good at it when I started. I wasn't. I was dismal. And it just took a very long time of continuous work to get to the stage where one line was the most important thing.
Was this a gratifying process?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I absolutely love it. I love to draw.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Well, that's at the bottom, at least, of your personal approach to art making,
Yes.
and why
Yeah.
you're not going to give up depiction in some form.
Probably not. I suspect it will become much like that, where it is so integrated that you really do have to seriously look at it for quite a while to be able to see where it's been done. And that's fine.
Right. So do you consider that trompe l'oeil? Do you consider that in effect or in intention a fool the eye type of?
Yeah, I like trompe l'oeil. The best one I've ever seen, I actually went to the side of the canvas to see if it was pasted on. No, I think it's a different mindset. I think these are different parts of the brain that are being engaged. And so it's tougher because of that. I can't do these simultaneously. I can't dance to the music and do the background, put it down, and then start rendering immediately, because they're totally different mindsets.
And you said before, do I recall that you said before that the gestural field is what you lay down first?
Yes. Yeah, I have probably, I'm going to say 200 backgrounds. Yeah.
Waiting to be quote brought to life.
Well, to figure out what's in them, because they're just marks.
There are historical precedents specifically for drawing forth that imagery from those marks. The surrealists, for instance,
Dada.
had a technique of what was it called? Huh? Automatism is the basic framework for the whole thing. That's the mindset which could look into a totally abstract field and find suggestion. But there was a technique, decalcomania, where two pieces of paper covered in ink or pigment were pressed together and then pulled apart. The painter then looked at both images and found references to the real or perhaps the dreamt world in each, and brought those suggestions forth through as little manipulation as possible. And there's something to that here too. Particularly if you say that that each scumbled field suggests to you when you look at it again, suggests to you a pair of eyes or a hand.
Well, there is, and also the techniques are not dissimilar. I mean, part of this, I will fold this paper and press it together to get mirror images, particularly if I like the way something is moving. For me, doing the backgrounds is totally, I try my damnedest to turn off my head. And, either through music or whatever. And I only want it to be movement. I only want it, I keep normally one thought only inside my head, and I keep saying it over and over, much like a mantra. And that sort of stills the rest of my population that lives there. And that's how some of them actually got to be. Otherwise, if you stop and think in the middle of this process, gee, is this any good? Oh, you're gone. That's it. You're just gone.
So what your mention of automatism is actually active in your process.
It is. It absolutely is. Yeah.
You're working automatically without prior goal, and without motivation per se in the process of production.
Well, I think for painters in particular, and also sort of in the society we live in, you paint something with a goal, like, oh, this is going to be part of a show, I wonder if this will sell, blah, blah. It is so freeing when you don't have to do that. It is so tremendously freeing when you just slap down whatever, and you're just doing it.
And you're not worrying about about audiences or deadlines or
no, doesn't matter. And you don't care whether the paint gets on the floor, hence the splatter room. The walls, makes no difference.
Right. I see. I now get a better picture of the splatter room. It's a room that's for others might be lined with foam, but in your case lined with sheets.
Yes, it is. It's tarps everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. This might be a good time to open up the discussion to the audience. And I was wondering if anyone has a... Yes?
So the monkey, the Japanese snow monkey, is notoriously known for a creature you're not supposed to look into the eyes. Yet a lot of these artworks here, you're able to stare into the eye, continuously stare into the eye, but yet the monkey is also hidden. Even though this is a monkey that runs free.
Yeah.
How come both of that's happening?
It was very weird circumstances in Kyoto, Japan. One of the first things I discovered is, you don't get to stand up without a camera and look at them because they'll tear your face off, and they get very aggressive very quick. But for whatever reason, they see a camera as like something between you and them, and they don't view that as aggressive. So I was able to take photos of them as they were staring at me. And if they have an emotion, that's the emotion they were showing when they were staring at me. They're absolutely fascinating creatures. They used to be considered, they've gone through a whole evolution. They used to be gods in Japan. They were part of the Shinto Buddhist tradition. And then they got to be jokesters, and then they got to be, demons, and then they got to be all these horrible things. But the see no evil, hear no evil, that's all out of that tradition.
The monkey itself, too, if you see a lot of photos of them, they're also the monkey that you'll see in hot springs, and they have this euphoric sense about them as they sit in their very fluent, as you were saying, they're fluent.
Yeah, they're very bright, and certainly the ones I ran into where I don't think they're, and they're also very playful. And they roll giant snowballs for absolutely no reason at all other than the fact they like them. And they're huge. I mean, you're talking huge snowballs. And then they also throw snowballs at one another, which I find hilarious. I'm going back, and I want to spend a couple of months back there. I did drawings while I was there on my iPad, and they seemed to know or sense when I was drawing them because they'd freeze, which was really weird. They just turned into models when I was drawing them. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. That's almost the opposite reaction to the aggression that they show if you stare at them.
Yeah, exactly. And I had to, of course, look at them. I didn't look them in the face. I had to look at them when I was drawing them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they just absolutely froze, stayed right where they were. Yeah, it was very
Yes.
cool.
So within the sort of gestural field of action, you're splattering and applying paint. Is there anything procedural that might last within a session or within a few days where you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be using thinner paint now, or this, narrow palette of colors, or these thick paints, 2 days from now? Is there any such procedural thinking, or does it develop over the time in which you work in the background?
Ah, secrets.
I'm asking for the guys.
Okay, here's the crazy part. I have a friend, which I of course don't speak to anymore, who gave me the Jackson Pollock puzzle of Autumn, whatever that thing is.
Autumn Rhythms?
Yes, oh my God. 1,000 pieces of lines. And so I didn't put it together. I talked someone else into putting it together, which good on me. And then I took it apart and I chose randomly pieces every day. And that's how I did them. Yeah, I would just choose whatever colors were on that little piece of the puzzle. And I would just throw paint and splatter and use whatever was in the house, and it didn't matter.
So you sort of just outsource that thinking.
Yeah, I just,
Throwing dice, or just
yeah, instead of throwing dice, I just chose a little puzzle piece and went, okay, that works. I like that.
And did you choose the puzzle piece or just go in blindly and pick one up?
No, they were in a hat. I just chose 4 or 5 of them out of the hat, and that was what I did for the day.
Do you find yourself pouring like being a block and giving yourself a rule of like, I will not get up until this entire block is finished, or
No, you know what? I'm at the stage now where I get totally lost in it. I have to remember to eat. I have to remember that, oh, it got dark outside. I unplug everything. And I'm not of the generation, I wasn't actually born with one of those things in my hand, So I don't miss it. And I turn it off, I unplug stuff, I go into the splatter room, and I'm gone. Bye-bye.
so you go into that much like dancing, you go into a certain mode within each day, kind of like part of that mode. And then when you go into the next day, you're putting in the second layer. Are you trying to get back to that mode, or now it's just a new layer?
I don't even think about it. The only thing I did think about, because I got into a thing where I was having a really good time playing, and so I actually clocked in. I have a calendar where I actually stamped, I put a time in, and I then had to stop at 5-6 hours later. I made myself stop, because otherwise, the dog would starve and mail would pile up, but I don't have to answer to anyone, so it's very easy for me to do that.
Do you lose yourself similarly when you're rendering the referential parts, or is that transport entirely when you're creating the abstract fields?
No, the rendering is all thinking. It's all, you have to be there, you have to be present. You can't disassociate. You can't go outside yourself when you're rendering. It's all a skill set. It's like placing little strings around pins, or making holes, or
Yes.
I don't know if you addressed this earlier, but this painting right here, the palette is definitely shifted from some of these others more
yeah.
to you. So at what point did that happen?
I have a certain prejudice against some colors, probably because I was raised Catholic. So navy blue is not my favorite color, and here I am.
Well, you're wearing it, you don't have to look at it.
That's right, yeah. But I've always not been partial to brown. I've always thought that was sort of like, ick. And I set myself this task. I'm going to use colors that I'm not real fond of. And everyone gravitates toward it, which is really, okay, fine. All right. So that's why I went into it, yeah.
When you're doing the backgrounds, do you work on more than one at a time?
Oh, yes, oh, very definitely, yeah. I have, and they're in various stages, because I have maybe 75, 80 life drawings. And I purposely do not hang them correctly. I turn them either sideways or upside down because I don't want to see the image. I'm only interested in what the line is doing. There's sometimes just, when you're least thinking about it, you just produce an absolutely exquisite line. And that's, if you see lines in some of these, it's because I liked that line. I wanted to preserve that line. Not the image. I don't care about the image.
The image is not a goal, but a means to it,
Exactly.
a larger goal.
Exactly.
Were you ever thinking of how Zen paintings and Japanese monkeys might have some similarity? Because there seems to be some Zen approach, some of the painting, some of the looser stuff, and then the monkeys and Japanese as well. So there's a subject matter activity. Is that something that you thought about motivationally, or just while working you thought, yeah, there's this kind of parallel?
Yeah, I wish I were that smart. No. No, what happened, I don't know whether that's whether I chose the monkeys because I'm fascinated with them, which I am. I absolutely am. That could be part of it. It's just, on these, if you were to see a lot of the other backgrounds, there's no way that they ever would remind you of any kind of animal or monkey or anything. They're just backgrounds. And these just seem to say, okay, I belong in there. I should be in there. Hey.
How far apart, when you took the photograph of the monkeys, how far apart were you focused?
Oh, God. It was scary because, when you first see them, you think, aren't they cute, sort of like a teddy bear? Oh, no, they're not cute, no. I made the mistake when I went around a curve, and they own property in Japan. There's Monkey Mountain, Monkey Island, blah, blah. And I went around a curve, and there was one sitting in the path. I'd never seen them in real life before. Well, I'm like, oh, look! And I looked it right in the face. It was a dominant male. It stood up, and, they've got really big teeth on the sides, smiled at me. And I knew I was in trouble. They come about, up to about serious damage. So I just immediately remembered I was supposed to look down and hunch over. Just shut up and don't.
Bow to the monkey.
Yes. And I did. And then it hissed at me and dropped down. Well, I'm not giving you a peanut. On Monkey Mountain, the monkeys are totally free. If you want to feed them, you go in the cage. The humans are in the cage. Makes perfect sense. So I didn't give that one a peanut. But they have gestures and they have looks on their face, and they have a way of looking at you. They never look at you directly. They have phenomenal peripheral vision. And they're looking at you. They're observing you. And like I said, when I started to draw them, they froze. They knew I was drawing them. So they got close enough that I took pictures of their fur that's all that's in the frame. And I thought, if you have fleas, I'm dead. No, outside the cage, they walked past me. They got so close to me that hairs actually stuck on my pants. I'm not looking at them, right? I don't care what they're doing. I'm not looking at you. I learned really well after.
She said she was working outside the box.
But yeah, it was, If you ever get the opportunity, it's absolutely amazing. They're amazing. Yeah, it was a phenomenal experience. Yeah.
Did you go to Japan with the intention of meeting?
Yeah, that was the whole reason we went. Yeah. I just was thrilled because I'm, of course, a product of the Midwest and then of San Diego, and I thought, oh, it's going to be a giant, Sea World, or I don't even know what the hell I was thinking. It's not. It's absolutely not. You are in their habitat, and you either pay attention or you just, I would imagine you get hurt if you don't. So, is it? Okay.
Anytime, we have time for one last question?
Ah,
Or we're just going to sit here until we get one?
that's right.
Yeah, could you tell us about this painting? It's a little different than the rest, the one of the rest.
Oh, well, I really, really like Gerhard Richter. And I like what he's done. I like the fact he can do hyperrealism, and then he can just turn around and do squeegee paintings, which fascinates me. So I thought, well, what happens if I reverse it? What happens if I do a whole painting in grays, and then I just start splattering? And it worked. And so that's what I did. There's a whole painting underneath that, which wasn't very good, which is why I didn't have any. I used to cut up paintings into smaller paintings and sell them that way when the big ones didn't sell. So this seems perfectly normal.
Okay. That's something that you expect of an abstract expressionist as opposed to a realist. So we know where you're going with
Yeah, exactly.
that. And we know where we're going, I guess, from here. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Yeah.
And
Thanks. All right.
Wine and water, there's no rush to leave. We're here for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for being on.
Thank you.
Thanks for leading the charge here.
Yes.
And this will be on YouTube at some point.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, sir.